In our first episode, Why Astrology Might Be Scientific, we explored how celestial movements interact with human consciousness. But if cosmic forces can influence our inner world, it means our thoughts and emotions are not mere abstract phantoms. They must possess a distinct physical interface within us. But where exactly is this interface located? When we think of the mind, we instinctively associate it with the brain. We assume our mind is locked inside our skull. But modern science is beginning to hint at a deeper reality. The human mind is not only not restricted to the head, but its field of influence extends far beyond the physical body. Consider the profound anomalies found in organ transplant cases. Numerous documented histories show us that lung recipients can inherit the specific tastes and cravings of their donors. Heart transplant recipients have awakened with deep, vivid memories of hobbies, talents, emotional patterns, and even specific dreams belonging to a stranger. If these mental faculties, once thought to be exclusive properties of the cerebral cortex, are rooted and stored within our organs, then the mind must at least span the entire body. It lives in our tissues, our chest, our belly, and our limbs. We see a haunting proof of this in phantom limb syndrome, where an amputated arm or leg still vividly feels burning, twisting, or itching. The physical flesh is gone, but the mental architecture of the limb remains. But the mind is less tangible, more subtle than dense matter, and by its very nature, whatever is subtle tends to expand. The flame always engulfs the firewood, the glow always radiates past the wax of the candle. Modern physics explains this through the second law of thermodynamics. In an isolated system, energy naturally disperses and spreads outward over time, increasing entropy. As matter transforms into higher energy, less constrained states, from solid to gas, plasma, and radiation, it occupies more space. In biology, we see this exact behavior in neurological signaling. A physical nerve, the gross matter, stays fixed in your arm while the electrical impulse, the subtle energy, spreads through the entire network almost instantaneously. If the mind behaves like radiation rather than dense matter, it must interact constantly with the environment. Being exposed to these vast, subtle fields explains how something as distant as planetary movement can exert a gravitational and energetic pull on human consciousness. Our scientific journey has always been a movement from gross matter to the subtlest particle to find ultimate truth. Within ourselves, moving from the physical body to the subtle layers, breath, thoughts, emotions, and intuition is the classic journey from ignorance to knowing. However, knowledge does not arrive through logic alone. It also arrives through feelings, a complementary internal process that runs parallel to thought. They exist at the same level of physical presence, yet they are fundamentally different. Have you ever been in a confrontation where rage completely carried you away? You flipped your lid, snapped, or experienced a temporary lapse of reason. Your brain felt locked. It is only hours later, when you are sitting alone in a quiet room, that the clarity returns and you think, "Oh, that's what I should have said." It is only when the emotional storm clears that the thought process can function. Conversely, have you ever felt so intensely in love or overwhelmed by joy that all thoughts completely disappeared? Think of it as the cosmic dance between the sun and the moon. To an untrained eye at noon, the sun is just a bright disk, At midnight, the moon takes its place. But during an eclipse, as one passes in front of the other, casting a profound shadow, it becomes undeniable that they are two separate, distinct entities. If emotions can cast a total shadow over thoughts, or if a thought can actively oppose what you are feeling at the exact same moment, they cannot be the same mechanism. They are two different entities sitting on opposite sides of an internal seesaw. One balances or cancels the other, but this seesaw holds more than just thoughts and emotions. Sitting on this exact same level of physical presence are sensory processing and desire. In modern neurology, we know that your five senses are constantly bombarding the nervous system with raw data. This sensory input doesn't wait for your higher intellect to analyze it. It hits the primitive, reactive centers of the brain first. The moment a sensory stimulus registers, a specific scent, a sharp sound, a sudden visual cue, it instantly sparks a reactive desire, a craving to move toward pleasure, or an aversion to flee from pain. Desire is not an abstract concept. It is a literal neurochemical current. It is the immediate flooding of dopamine across your neural pathways, demanding physical action. Because sensory processing and desire share the exact same physical bandwidth as thoughts and emotions, they constantly compete for control of the seesaw. Have you ever had a powerful craving, an intense desire, completely blindside your thought process? You know a certain choice isn't good for your long-term health, yet the sensory memory and the chemical pull of desire are so loud that your thoughts are completely muted. Just like a solar eclipse, a sudden surge of sensory desire can completely block out the light of your logic. They are all running on the same electrical grid of the body. But how do these subtle fields, sensory inputs, desires, emotions, and thoughts grip the physical flesh? Why is it that every human being, when hit with a wave of nervousness, feels it directly in the stomach? Why not the knee or the pinky finger? The answer lies in our nerve ganglions and the endocrine system. Let us begin at the absolute base of the spine, the ganglion impar. This is a unique, highly concentrated cluster of nerve cells located right in front of the tailbone. It serves as the ultimate junction box where the two main trunks of your sympathetic nervous system meet. Surrounding it are the coccygeal body and the coccygeal plexus, which supply sensation and motor innervation to the entire pelvic floor. Under the lens of modern psychosomatic medicine, we see that a mind dominated by chronic anxiety makes this ganglion hypersensitized. Fear is an inherently contractive emotion. When it strikes, the coccygeal plexus commands the deep muscles of the pelvic floor to clench. The biological result is a phenomenon known as pelvic guarding. Just as you hunch your shoulders against a cold wind, your root subconsciously locks. Over time, this chronic clenching manifests as persistent lower back pain, a physical feeling of instability or being completely ungrounded, and digestive stagnation and constipation, as the nerves governing elimination are locked in a defensive closed position. Yet without this primal stress response, our ancestors would have ignored danger, leading to the extinction of our species. Moving slightly higher, we reach the gonads. From a biological standpoint, these glands are driven by testosterone and estrogen to ensure the propagation of life. When our awareness is focused exclusively on the sensory layer, These hormones narrow our mental field of vision. This is the mechanism of obsession. The mind becomes trapped in a loop of intense craving and fleeting, temporary relief, the signature of raw lust. Furthermore, because this pelvic region directly regulates the elimination of fluids via the kidneys and bladder, it is deeply affected by guilt. When guilt stagnates here, it triggers tension in the deep pelvic stabilizers, the psoas and iliacus muscles, often called the muscles of the soul due to how they harbor emotional trauma. This toxic cocktail of obsession, lust, and guilt alters our chemistry, causing hormonal imbalances, reproductive discomfort, and a literal stiffness in the hips, as if the fluid, water-like nature of the lower body has frozen into ice, creating lymphatic stagnation. Yet without this raw fuel, we would lack the vital drive for both reproduction and creative vitality. Next is our internal furnace. Under normal conditions, the pancreas manages our blood, sugar, and energy distribution with beautiful precision. But anger acts like an explosive spike in the system. Because anger is a primitive fight response, the adrenal glands instantly dump massive waves of adrenaline and cortisol into the bloodstream. This is the immediate rush of a temper, which invariably leaves you feeling depleted, shaky, and chemically gross afterward. Gastroenterology research shows us that physically, anger violently increases the acidity of the stomach. It manifests as acute acid reflux, ulcers, a burning sensation in the gut, a locked jaw, and a tight defensive knot in the celiac plexus, the nerve bundle right behind the stomach. While anger is a sudden, hot explosion, hatred is a cold, lingering fire. It causes a chronic, sustained tightening of the celiac plexus, which restricts blood flow to your vital organs. When hatred becomes a permanent lifestyle, the liver becomes sluggish and toxic, manifesting externally as systemic inflammation, skin flare-ups, and a distinct dull or yellowish tint in the eyes. At the center of the chest sits the thymus gland, the master training ground of our immune system, paired with the physical heart. Jealousy and greed are profoundly contractive states born from a deep sense of internal scarcity. In the field of psychoneuroimmunology, researchers have mapped exactly how, when you feel jealous, your chest physically tightens, directly inhibiting the thymus gland. Because the thymus is responsible for training your T cells to defend your body, chronic jealousy literally lowers your immunity, leaving you highly susceptible to infections. When the mind becomes closed and hyperjudgmental, the immune signaling becomes confused, occasionally triggering autoimmune responses where the body begins to attack itself. Furthermore, the constant high alert vascular constriction caused by these states inflicts micro damage on the endothelium, the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels. This is the literal threshold of atherosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries. But watch what happens to our biology when we consciously shift into love, compassion, or generosity. Heart rate variability increases. The heart rhythm transitions from a jagged, chaotic stress pattern into a smooth, coherent wave, indicating a beautiful equilibrium between the sympathetic and parasympathetic networks. Concurrently, vagus nerve activity spikes, which instantly lowers blood pressure, relaxes the arterial walls through vasodilation, and floods the system with oxytocin. By stepping into an expansive emotional state, stress hormones drop, immune signaling normalizes, and the entire body enters a rest and restore mode that shields both heart regulation and thymus health. The thyroid gland, nestled in the throat, is the master controller of human metabolism. It dictates the exact speed at which every single cell converts fuel into energy. When you have a profound truth to speak but choose to swallow it, whether out of fear, shame, or a toxic desire to please, you create the literal globus pharyngeus, the lump in the throat. This is a powerful physical contraction of the laryngeal muscles surrounding the thyroid. Chronic emotional suppression blocks the healthy blood supply to the gland, directly contributing to the metabolic swings of hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism while spreading physical tension into the cervical spine and trapezius muscles. Grief operates similarly. While born in the heart, it is meant to be processed and discharged through the throat via crying. Unexpressed silent grief stagnates in the throat cavity, causing a heavy, choking sensation that over time results in chronic fatigue, temperature sensitivity, and deep brain fog. But when you step into gratitude and authentic creative expression, your vocal cords and neck muscles completely relax. This allows rich, oxygenated blood to irrigate the thyroid and parathyroid glands. Your metabolic hormones are secreted in a smooth, rhythmic harmony rather than chaotic stress spikes. Genuine creative expression optimizes your vagal tone, keeping your entire metabolism in a state of perfect homeostasis. Deep behind the bridge of the nose sits the pea-sized pituitary gland. As the master gland of the endocrine system, it issues the chemical commands that dictate the behavior of your thyroid, adrenals, and gonads. The intricate relationship between our mental states and physical sensations is governed entirely by this command center. When we operate from a place of judgment, prejudice, or intellectual arrogance, it triggers a sympathetic lock on the visual system and causes the pituitary gland to oversignal, generating an excess of hormonal noise. Physically, this manifests as a heavy contractive pressure concentrated directly behind the eyes, a tight tension headache across the forehead caused by microcontractions of the frontalis muscles, ocular strain that narrows your visual field into tunnel vision, and chronic sinus inflammation. We experience this subjectively as dense frontal lobe brain fog. Conversely, shifting the mind into a state of intuition, equanimity, or flow immediately alters our biology. Neurologists observe a shift in brainwave architecture toward alpha and gamma coherence. The pituitary enters a state of peaceful command, sending a global release signal through the body. Blood flow and oxygenation surge to the prefrontal cortex, bringing a distinct physical sensation of lightness or a cool, gentle tingling between the eyebrows. Your peripheral vision expands, the ciliary muscles and optic nerve relax, and systemic cortisol levels instantly drop, leaving you with a profound sense of physical stillness. Finally, we reach the summit, the pineal gland, a tiny pine cone-shaped structure buried deep in the center of the brain. The pineal is our light-sensing chronometer, producing melatonin to govern our circadian rhythms. Remarkably, this gland contains cellular structures nearly identical to the rod and cone light receptors of our physical eyes. When we touch states of bliss, oneness, and devotion, our brainwaves shift into highly synchronized gamma or deep theta states, meaning the left and right hemispheres are pulsing in perfect unison. Time seems to physically distort or vanish altogether as the pineal gland is stimulated to secrete neurochemical compounds like pinoline and potentially endogenous DMT, altering our baseline perception into a state of profound ecstasy. Conversely, living in states of delusion, alienation, or deep cynicism completely fractures this internal clock. Your circadian rhythm shatters, causing severe insomnia, chronic neurological sensitivity to light and sound, and micro seizures of anxiety. This sustained chemical disharmony ultimately compromises the integrity of the blood brain barrier itself. Our thoughts and emotions are not separate from our flesh, they are the invisible architects of our health. Every shift in emotion alters our nerve impulses, which dictates our hormonal secretions, ultimately manifesting as our physical reality. But the journey up the vertical circuit does not end at the physical boundary of our glands. Thoughts and emotions, though incredibly powerful, are still just the restless surface of a much deeper ocean. Beyond the storms of what we feel and what we think lies an even subtler architecture of the human being. Join us in our third and final episode, where we step across the threshold of the ordinary mind to explore the highest faculties of human consciousness, the discriminative intellect, the whisper of conscience, and the raw mechanics of pure intuition. We will map how these silent, profound forces, the ones that enable insight, self-reflection, and ultimate discernment, exert an undeniable, tangible mastery over our physical form. The weather map is complete. Now it's time to meet the one who observes the sky.